with
have
respect.
no
She's
idea
been voted
what's
in
going
by the
on
people
in
of
the United
Illinois.
States because the BBC deceives them with people like this from the far left squad. Did you try to find a socialist to put her on the air? I mean, this is the lowest level of journalistic standards I've ever seen.
Keir Starmer's leadership of the UK Labour Party has increasingly come under fire, especially as his handling of both domestic and international issues has drawn criticism from all sides. One of the most significant challenges he faces is the ongoing concern about the BBC's treatment of his leadership and the party. The broadcaster, a central player in British media, has often been accused of bias, particularly in its coverage of the Labour Party and Starmer's leadership. Critics argue that the BBC is too willing to pander to one side of the political spectrum, often giving disproportionate voice to views that reflect far-left ideologies, at the expense of more balanced reporting. This has created a sense of mistrust not only among supporters of the Labour Party but also among the wider public, who are growing increasingly frustrated with what they see as skewed journalism. The growing perception that the BBC is undermining Labour's efforts to present unified and competent leadership is detrimental to the party's image. Starmer, whose image has struggled due to mixed messages and a perceived lack of decisive action, now finds himself at the mercy of a media landscape that appears to be compounding his challenges. The most recent controversy, which saw a BBC journalist's questioning of Trump's spokesperson, only added fuel to the fire. The spokesperson, in a particularly fiery exchange, accused the BBC of misleading the British public by offering a platform to voices that are openly critical of Trump, and by extension the political establishment that supports him. His anger was directed at what he perceived as a deliberate attempt by the BBC to project an unfair, biased perspective, specifically highlighting its relationship with figures from the far left, who have long been critical of the Trump administration. For many Labour supporters, the BBC's role in amplifying certain voices while marginalising others, especially in the context of the party's leadership, has become an ongoing frustration. This growing dissatisfaction with the BBC's editorial stance is only making Starmer's leadership crisis more acute. As the media continues to be a dominant force in shaping public opinion, Starmer's inability to counter these portrayals effectively is leaving him increasingly vulnerable. Labour's credibility, already weakened by internal divisions, is further eroded by the perception that key media outlets, including the BBC, are not providing fair or balanced coverage. This issue of media bias is something that will require careful management from Starmer, as failing to address it could continue to fuel the growing doubts about his leadership and the future of the Labour Party. The exchange between the BBC reporter and Donald Trump's spokesperson was not just a confrontation over policy, but a striking demonstration of the power dynamics that shape media narratives. The spokesperson's reaction to the interview, particularly his criticism of the BBC's choice of guests, highlights a deeper frustration with the perceived bias within mainstream media. The reporter, who had invited a far-left Democratic congresswoman to discuss Trump's policies, was sharply criticized for giving a platform to a figure widely regarded as holding extreme views within American politics. According to the spokesperson, the congresswoman's characterization of Trump as a dictator and fascist was not just politically misguided but also fundamentally dishonest. For him, the decision to showcase such views without proper challenge or balance in the discussion illustrated the BBC's failure to provide fair and accurate reporting. His frustration was palpable, calling out the BBC for what he saw as its deliberate role in misleading the British public. This sharp critique raised serious questions about journalistic integrity and the standards upheld by the BBC. The spokesperson's accusation was not merely about the content of the interview, but about the broader implications of presenting one-sided narratives to a global audience. For him, this was an example of a pattern where media outlets, particularly those like the BBC, allowed political biases to influence their coverage. He accused the BBC of being complicit in promoting a distorted version of the truth, one that catered to a far-left agenda and systematically undermined conservative viewpoint. The exchange set the stage for an even deeper debate about the role of the media in shaping political discourse, especially in an era where polarized narratives are more common than ever. By bringing the argument into the open, Trump's spokesperson not only highlighted a personal grievance, but also brought attention to a larger issue of media manipulation. His remarks served as a reminder that, in an age of media saturation, every interview and every broadcast is seen through a particular ideological lens, often leaving little room for nuance or balanced viewpoints. The harsh criticism of the BBC in this context was a warning shot aimed at the media's role in influencing public perception. It suggested that when media outlets fail to present a full range of opinions and voices, they risk alienating audiences and reinforcing division rather than fostering understanding. The spokesperson's outburst was not simply an attack on the journalist, it was a call for a more responsible, less partisan approach to journalism, one that allows for fair representation of all political perspectives. In doing so, he not only defended Trump's policies, but also posed a broader challenge to the role of media in shaping political outcomes. The accusations against the BBC by Trump's spokesperson were not just limited to the selection of guests, but extended to the overall narrative that the network was crafting about the Trump administration. The spokesperson's outrage was rooted in the belief that the BBC, in particular, had consistently provided a platform for figures who were fundamentally opposed to Trump's leadership, often without presenting counter-arguments or alternative perspectives. He specifically took issue with the portrayal of Trump as a dictator, a term that the spokesperson argued was used recklessly by figures who were part of the Democratic Party's far left wing. According to him, this portrayal was not only misleading but also damaging to the public's understanding of Trump's political agenda and his governance. The spokesperson's vehement response to the BBC interview was an attempt to draw attention to what he saw as the irresponsible and biased practices in mainstream media. By allowing such extreme views to be presented as legitimate political discourse, the BBC in his eyes was complicit in spreading misinformation. He was particularly incensed by the interview with the Congresswoman who, in his view, had used inflammatory language without any serious challenge or opportunity for a broader discussion. The decision to highlight such extreme opinions without offering a fair representation of Trump's position only served to further entrench political divisions, he claimed. For the spokesperson, this was more than just a matter of media bias. It was about accountability. He suggested that the BBC, as a publicly funded institution, had a responsibility to reflect a more balanced, accurate portrayal of political events, especially when it involved figures as polarizing as Trump. This belief in fairness and responsibility was central to his argument. He felt that by giving a platform to individuals who were publicly hostile to Trump without offering a counterpoint, the BBC was actively contributing to a distorted understanding of American politics. Moreover, the spokesperson accused the BBC of attempting to manipulate British perceptions of American politics. His comments were not just an emotional response, but an attempt to challenge the media's role in shaping political narratives. By airing such interviews without providing balance or context, he believed the BBC was undermining the public's ability to form their own informed opinions. This argument, although rooted in his support for Trump, also raised larger questions about the responsibility of media outlets in their portrayal of political leaders, particularly those as divisive as Trump. As the conversation turned increasingly hostile, the spokesperson's comments underscored a growing frustration with the media's perceived lack of objectivity and its influence on public opinion. In calling out the BBC for its practices, he was not only defending Trump but also raising broader concerns about media integrity and its role in shaping political discourse. The confrontation between Trump's spokesperson and the BBC reporter highlighted a fundamental issue that has become increasingly evident in political discourse: the power of media in shaping public opinion. The spokesperson's criticism went beyond simple disagreement with the views expressed by the Congresswoman. It was about the broader implications of how the media selectively amplifies certain voices while silencing others. His anger stemmed from what he saw as the BBC's deliberate choice to give airtime to individuals with extreme anti-Trump views, without providing an equal platform for those who might offer a more nuanced or balanced perspective. This selective representation, he argued, was more than just a flaw in journalism, it was a distortion of the truth. By featuring figures who labeled Trump as a dictator or fascist without allowing any substantive rebuttal or context, the BBC was not just reporting the news but actively shaping it. The spokesperson's outrage was rooted in the belief that the BBC, as a prominent global broadcaster, had a responsibility to present a fair and balanced view, especially on issues as contentious as Trump's presidency. The lack of balance in the interview, he claimed, reinforced a narrative that painted Trump in a negative light without allowing for any genuine discussion of his policies or achievements. This practice, according to the spokesperson, was not only irresponsible but also dangerous, as it led to an increasingly polarized public opinion. The idea of media bias, particularly in major institutions like the BBC, is not new, but the spokesperson's comments brought it to the forefront in a particularly charged moment. He argued that the BBC's actions weren't just reflecting public sentiment, they were actively molding it. By providing a platform for figures who openly criticized Trump without offering a chance for rebuttal, The network was exacerbating divisions and contributing to a distorted understanding of American politics. This narrative, he asserted, was not only harmful to Trump, but to the public's ability to engage with political issues in a fair and informed way. The issue of media manipulation is particularly potent in today's political climate, where information is more readily accessible than ever before. The spokesperson's critique underscored the importance of media outlets acting with integrity and accountability. He suggested that if the BBC truly wanted to serve its audience, it needed to move away from sensationalism and toward a more objective form of journalism, one that allows all sides to be heard and considered. The conversation shifted beyond the specifics of Trump's leadership and took on a broader meaning, as it highlighted the role of media in either bridging or widening the gap between different political factions. The spokesperson's challenge to the BBC was a call for a return to journalistic standards that prioritize fairness and accuracy over political agendas. The heated exchange between Trump's spokesperson and the BBC reporter ultimately reveals a much deeper issue: the manipulation of political narratives by mainstream media. In a world where news is consumed rapidly and in great quantities, the role of large media organizations like the BBC has become more critical than ever in shaping public opinion. The spokesperson's passionate criticism pointed to a growing sentiment that major outlets, such as the BBC, are failing in their duty to present news in an unbiased, fair manner. By providing platforms to figures who attack Trump with little opportunity for rebuttal, the BBC not only disregarded basic journalistic standards, but also contributed to the deepening political polarization in the public. The spokesperson's words were not just a defense of Trump's character, they were a call to recognize the power media holds in influencing political outcomes, and the necessity for more responsible journalism. His argument was that by allowing far-left figures to dominate the conversation, without offering a balanced perspective, the BBC was complicit in distorting the public's understanding of political events. This skewed portrayal has real-world consequences, as it further entrenches people in their political beliefs and reduces the likelihood of constructive dialogue between opposing sides. The spokesperson's response to the interview was not just about defending Trump, but about challenging the media's growing tendency to shape narratives according to political agendas. He accused the BBC of presenting one-sided inflammatory rhetoric as if it were fact, thus leaving little room for those with differing opinions to engage in meaningful discourse. The idea that a prominent media outlet could shape a narrative without accountability or challenge highlights the dangerous intersection between media and politics in contemporary society. As the spokesperson made clear, the ultimate responsibility of a media organization should be to inform and educate, not manipulate. When news outlets like the BBC give voice to partisan figures without providing an equal platform for counter-arguments, they not only fail in their role as impartial communicators, but also contribute to the erosion of trust between the media and the public. The spokesperson's emotional outburst underscored this critical issue, emphasizing that the credibility of the BBC and similar outlets would continue to be called into question if they didn't address their biases. It was not enough for the BBC to claim neutrality. It had to prove it by ensuring that all political perspectives were fairly represented, and that the voices of those who disagreed with the dominant narrative were given proper consideration. The spokesperson's challenge was a powerful reminder that in a democratic society, media organizations should be held accountable for their role in influencing political discourse. The broader implications of this exchange are clear. The public, both in the UK and beyond, deserves media that prioritizes truth over partisanship. Fostering a political environment where all views can be debated respectfully, the confrontation between Trump's spokesperson and the BBC reporter highlighted the growing divide between mainstream media outlets and their audiences, as well as the increasing public skepticism about media integrity. The spokesperson's outburst, filled with frustration and anger, was not just an isolated incident. It was a reflection of a much larger, ongoing battle over media influence and political narratives. For many, the BBC represents an establishment voice, one that is expected to maintain journalistic integrity and impartiality. However, the spokesperson's criticism pointed to what he saw as a consistent pattern of bias in the network's coverage of political issues, particularly those involving figures like Donald Trump. The BBC's failure to offer a platform for balanced discussions, instead giving voice to those who openly criticized Trump, was seen by the spokesperson as an indication of the network's reluctance to engage in fair and objective reporting. His angry remarks were not simply about defending Trump, but about calling out what he perceived as the media's role in pushing a political agenda. This exchange highlighted a deeper issue that transcends individual politicians and speaks to the larger question of how the media influences public perception and political discourse. For the spokesperson, the BBC's biased reporting was not just a matter of poor journalism, but an active effort to shape public opinion in a way that aligns with certain political views. The frustration expressed was symptomatic of a broader feeling that mainstream media outlets, including the BBC, have become less about delivering the news and more about advancing specific ideological perspectives. As the spokesperson made clear, this approach risks alienating large portions of the public, who feel their voices and opinions are not being fairly represented. In a democracy where the media plays a crucial role in informing and educating citizens, this type of one-sided reporting undermines public trust and damages the foundation of free and fair political debate. See you soon!